Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll give it just a minute or so for folks to jump on. Hope everybody's having a good Thursday so far. Short week, long weekend. I feel like I need one of those every week, but
yeah, I'm down for a 4-day work week, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Whoops. All right, I'll go ahead and dive in while people are still joining us. But of course, welcome everyone to our session today, leveraging data for maintenance planning in processing and manufacturing industries. We're super glad to have you here. I'll introduce our guest speaker in just a moment, but I want to give you a little bit of direction about your screen, that you should see a little Q&A box somewhere on your screen, depending on what device you are using. Feel free as the session is going on to put any questions that you have for Chris in there. And we will have a session at the end where we do Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions in there. There's a good chance we won't be able to get to all of the questions. And so we'll get through as many as we can. And Chris will talk a little bit more about how you could reach him as well if there are lingering questions after today's session is over. But with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Chris. Chris Ortiz is the maintenance engineering manager at Louse Truss in Burlington, Washington. And Chris, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, no, I can start. I can definitely.
Awesome.
Well, first of all, I'd like to, start by saying, thanks for everyone who's coming on. It's an honor to be here today and to conduct this webinar with you. I like to kind of create some expectations for everybody. Is that it's about 45 minutes to 60 minutes of going over this topic, and I'll try to go over the best that I can. And that understanding that there are a lot of people here, and that everyone has a different knowledge base, everyone has different experiences, and there could be some information for you here that you already know very well, maybe better than I do, and it's just great review. But I'm sure there's plenty of people here that it's new, and I want to be able to provide information for them as well, so they can move forward with maybe some new initiatives. So I just kind of wanted to start that off as a tee off. Let me just do something here real quick. Okay, so yeah, so a little bit about myself. I've been a manufacturing professional most of my career. I'd say for about 25 years, I've been in various positions within manufacturing, either as an employee or as a business owner. I am currently the maintenance engineering manager at Louse Truss in Burlington, Washington. I head up the maintenance initiatives, all of our research and development, which is mostly wrapped around equipment modifications and retrofits, specialized tooling, things like that, and other specialized engineering projects. Prior to working for Louse Truss, I owned a couple of different businesses. One was a consulting firm that went around North America and Europe in implementing various lean manufacturing processes and maintenance initiatives, manufacturing engineering, technology type things. I've written a handful of books. I won, it's actually called the Shingo Prize for Operational Excellence. So I have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge in this. But then again, I also believe that, learning is a communal effort, and that I've learned a lot from other individuals in my time. And I'm hoping that, as we move forward with this webinar and others in the series, that, all that can come together and really help everyone out. So, yeah, like Katie said, there's probably going to be a good amount of questions we won't be able to get to. And my email will be posted at the end of this presentation, and you're all welcome to email me after the webinar when you're able to, and I'll be happy to answer your questions the best way that I can. So with that said, we're going to get right into it here. So there's 5 major points that we're probably going to go over today. I think it's very important to cover kind of some baseline information, kind of a high-level view of total productive maintenance and what that looks like, as performance metrics are a part of that. So we'll get a nice baseline first before we get into it. You know, I'm going to show you what I consider, you know, the pillars of total productive maintenance. You know, so kind of the, you know, the theme of the pillars of anything. Like, what are the main concepts and ideas within a particular topic? I've kind of put together what I feel are those main pillars, to give you an understanding that, you know, this is a very large overarching concept in a manufacturing environment. And then I'll get into the actual maintenance performance metrics. I'm going to focus on what I'm calling common and uncommon. I'll spend more time on the common, but go over briefly some of the more uncommon ones. But there's a lot of different metrics that you can pick from, that you can track, that you can report, and you can kind of pick and choose as you want. And then I'm going to go into how you create goals for those metrics and how you then report them in your organization. And like Katie said, we'll kind of be a recap and a Q&A kind of near the end. So that's kind of where I think it'd be a good mix of everything here for you. So total productive maintenance. Well, it's really important to understand that it's a company-wide approach. You know, I think that, at least what I have seen over the years in a lot of different initiatives, is that we get really kind of siloed into what we think this department does, or that department does, and they have, you know, their initiatives, and what they are doing is their responsibility. And it's important to understand that, you know, this is a company-wide approach to maintaining and extending the longevity of equipment, and it involves all different levels of the organization. It involves, you know, multiple people, management, you know, production crews, the maintenance staff, your vendors. Like, it's relatively comprehensive. It's definitely not a one or two isolated initiative. It's actually quite a bit. And the metrics are just a small part of that. So it involves various systems and processes and accountability. A lot of those systems and processes I won't be able to go over in detail today. I will show them briefly during the pillar section. But yeah, it's an ongoing continuous improvement initiative where you're creating baselines and systems and processes, and then continually improving upon those. So yeah, have a good understanding of the overall topic and what's involved in that. So let's go over these pillars. I actually have quite a bit here, and I have seen different definitions of pillars of TPM. I've kind of created my own here. Obviously, there's a pillar that's centered around metrics, which we'll cover today. You know, department key performance indicators. How do you track them? How do you report them? How you modify and change your metrics over time to best suit your organization based on each year's initiatives. Another important element in TPM is having and maintaining a centralized maintenance management system that helps identify, you know, the tasks the department is working on, prioritizing work, tracking and reporting man hours of those tasks, the scheduling, tracking inventory, tracking cost. It's really important to have a system to do that. It just provides really good information to manage the department. There is a pillar in there for what I call operator PM. It's where we are placing some responsibilities of maintaining equipment on frontline workers who are running equipment. Usually falls under the category of proactive maintenance. They may have a posted schedule of work right at their workstation. There is an accountability system, standard operating procedures and protocols around how they operate. This is a very important pillar in TPM, that they have stake in the game, and that they are having some responsibilities around maintaining equipment. You know, the next pillar, of course, is probably the maintenance level preventative maintenance. Centers around preventative and predictive maintenance, repairs, cross-training, tracking hours, standard operating procedures for them. So that's kind of the another level of maintenance that's separate from the operators. I'm a firm believer, and this is probably my lean manufacturing background, it's kind of hard to get away from it, is the visual workplace. I've kind of joked with people over the past when they really get focused on wanting to have these really big inventory initiatives, or we need these really complicated systems in place, and I walk back in their maintenance department and I'm like, they can't find their tools. So the importance of a organized work environment, the concept is called 5S for lean manufacturing. How we organize our spare parts room, how we replenish our spare parts, just that really dialed in, organized department. I've told my team at Laos Trust that, we are going to set the example, right? We're going to set the example for organization and how things look as we are a support mechanism. And the last pillar here is what I call asset preservation. And it really kind of goes above and beyond. It really focuses on, modifying equipment for your own personal needs, incorporating different engineering practices to sustain equipment longer, looking at how you literally can reduce and eliminate preventative maintenance tasks that you have, so you don't have to do them anymore. Upgrades, working with vendors. So I think it's important that there isn't necessarily a step-by-step here. They're all important elements. They all complement each other. Deciding where you start is kind of an individual basis, but this is just a really good example of what I think is involved in an overall total productive maintenance program. So, and of course, you can email me and I can definitely respond to specific questions about that. So, okay, let's get into the actual metrics themselves. So, tips to get started. Well, there's a lot of different ways to measure the performance in the department, and a lot of different metrics that you can pick from. At the end of the day, we're trying to create a baseline for the department. Like, what is the best representation of performance and accountability for your individual departments? I'm going to go over a bunch of them. I'm going to cover what I consider the common ones, but I'm also going to show you the ones that we use at Laos Trust and how I've been working through those and how we report that information. It's really important to identify what you're going to measure in the department and then what you're going to report. Those are two very different things. So you might measure and report something differently to your individual department, and you might actually report something to other managers or other departments. But yeah, so creating that scorecard, creating a scorecard with the metrics that best represents your organization, and then how you're actually going to track and report those. And I also think it's very important that you might want to look at changing them from time to time, because the needs of that metric might change. The company may be going into a different direction that changes the initiatives in the maintenance department. And now that means you might have to start measuring things differently. So be open to discarding metrics that may not be, doing you good anymore, and you want to move on to something else. So at Laos Trust, we've changed our metrics in maintenance probably 3 or 4 times over the last 5 years, keeping some that really make sense, and then keeping some that just don't, and we pick other ones. So here is what I feel are the most common from my experience. And again, there may be people listening in that have a different experience and a different common list, and that's great. Here are the ones that I have felt have been really valuable for me, not only with clients that I had in my consulting business, but what we have here at Laos Trust. Uptime is a big one, and more specifically, uptime percent. You can look at uptime hours. I just look at a percentage. I like uptime because it's really a representation of equipment availability. Planned maintenance hours. This is a pretty common one where you have maintenance tasks that are pre-scheduled and preset, and you're wanting to measure those against a standard time. So if a certain task takes a certain amount of time and they do the work, what is that? What's the comparison? That's a good productivity measurement. I like to measure output in the department. So I use completed work orders as the guideline. It gives me an idea on not only the work orders that are coming in, but then what are we getting done? And I can see the different amount of completed orders in all the different plants that we have. Mean time before failure is a common one. I mean, it's actually a little uncommon because there's a lot involved in predictive maintenance. I mean, for those listening who've done predictive modeling and mean time before failure, there's a little finesse involved in that. I guess probably out of the what I call the uncommon list is probably at the top. We do measure mean time before failure at Laos Trust. And it's really important. I think you should be measuring some form of inventory metrics. And there's a lot of different ways to go about that. And I'm going to be covering these again in more detail. But I feel that these, from my perspective, are the most common. And for us, they've been probably the most useful moving forward to make decisions. Here's a quick list of other maintenance metrics that I won't necessarily go into a lot of detail on today. Again, I'm happy to answer these in some follow-up emails, or maybe Katie will be able to get some information from you all and say, hey, we do want to have another webinar on these ones specifically, and of course, we're happy to do that. Comparing planned versus unplanned maintenance, it's kind of a comparison of ratios. We're doing 80% planned on a regular basis and 20% unplanned. Response time, right? Like how quickly the team responds to when maybe a piece of equipment is down. Downtime and uptime hours is a metric you can use. You can look at total labor cost. Mean time before recovery, how long on average equipment is down before we get it back up again. I've discussed mean time before failure. Cost to maintain equipment is more of a longer range metric, looking at how much money is going into a piece of equipment before we might need to replace it or do major upgrades or major retrofits. And also a number of call-ins. So this would be like how many times does the maintenance team get called in off hours, off shift to work on things. So just something to remember. There's other metrics out there you could use for your department. So what's going to get covered today, to just kind of quickly recap, is going to be these ones. Uptime. So I like uptime percentage. At least that's my favorite one. Obviously, it's a very important one, how much equipment is up. And depending on your industry, I feel there's specific targets that can be reached in one industry and specific targets that can't be reached in another industry. So one thing in our industry, so we make trusses for the home construction industry, is that the equipment that we actually buy and use is actually designed to run for a long time. We're talking 24 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. It's designed to have a high level of uptime as compared to maybe other industries and other equipment. So for those in the room who would be new to this, here's kind of a simple example of uptime, and then I'm going to one that's a little more spread out through an entire month. There's a certain amount of time that's available to run the equipment. So in this example, I'm showing 7 hours. You have your number of shifts that you're running those 7 hours and the number of pieces of equipment that's in the facility. So you start by multiplying all three of those numbers, okay? So total available uptime in this example is roughly 84 hours. Let's say there's been some documented downtime of 5 hours. So just by the simple math of it, it comes out to about 94% uptime. That's probably the easiest way to measure uptime. That's the way that we do it at Laos Trust, and it's been very effective. And if you get any more questions about that, please definitely send them to Katie. Here is a good example of an entire month. So what's really interesting is that we operate pretty good uptime, about 98% on average the last 4 to 5 years. We have these isolated instances where equipment is down for 3 or 4 hours, and depending on the production supervisor, it's a disaster, right? Like it's just the whole world's falling apart. And they might have these isolated instances of downtime of 2-3 hours throughout the month. So from their perspective, it feels bad. Like it feels like uptime is low. But then when you look at this slide and you look at how much time is available to run the equipment, and then you take those isolated pieces of downtime and you add them all up, it actually isn't too bad when you look at the overall picture. So I just created a list here of just kind of generic pieces of equipment and available hours per shift, the number of shifts for each of those equipment, and the total available for that piece of equipment. And then when you begin to add up the number of days in a month and the hours in a month, in this example, I've got 2,940 hours to run the machines. And 68 hours, although at the time in which that downtime happened seems like a lot, it's really still almost 98% uptime. So I think this is really important for those listening, that when you begin to measure anything, you have to know how to communicate that properly, so people can understand what the bigger picture looks like. Now, I'm not implying that the machine being down for 3 hours is no big deal, and the production supervisors are, I guess you could say, catastrophizing the problem. I'm not saying that. We want to deal with that. But bigger picture, overall improvement to the overall performance of the actual plant. So, planned maintenance hours, common metric. And I'm actually going to compare it to unplanned so you can kind of see the difference here. But planned maintenance hours is a very common metric. There's a couple ways that planned maintenance is tracked. The first one is pre-scheduled. So this would be that, in your centralized maintenance management system, you have a list of all your equipment, and you have a list of all the scheduled preventative maintenance in the system that automatically generates work. Those specific tasks that are pre-scheduled have what I call a set standard time to do the job. Greasing these bearings should take X. Replacing this filter should take X. Draining the fluid and putting in new fluid is X. These are planned maintenance hours that are going to be in the system, and you can compare them to a standard. You can compare the time it took them to finish it to the standard in place. Other planned maintenance is stuff that just comes up during the week, during your meetings. It's work that has been decided by the department that's going to get done, that's not pre-scheduled in the system. It's logged into the system, and it could be retrofits, it could be upgrades, it could be updates, it could be repairs. It could be really anything that's going to be done at a further date that's not totally necessary at the time. That is considered planned maintenance. Planned maintenance can be done during, off time. You might have to shut the equipment off to do it, where you'll be tracking downtime at that point. But that's planned maintenance hours, and I've been tracking that for probably 4 years, and don't really intend on stopping that. It's been very effective for managing the work and things like that. When you simply compare it to unplanned maintenance hours, unplanned is, there's a couple different ways to look at this. I'm going to go over it a little more on the next slide. It's more reactive downtime hours is what most people are familiar with. What's that noise? What's that sound? What's going on? We might need to go work on that at some time. And I think it's important to understand that unplanned maintenance time doesn't necessarily equate to downtime, like the equipment not being available. Because something that just comes up that you were not expecting, and then you're going to go work on it at a different time, and it may not shut the equipment off, or it could be something you can do on an off shift or an off time when the equipment is not being used. A little more on planned maintenance. Like I said, they have a standard time. Where I have found the value in tracking planned maintenance hours is being able to balance the workloads of my team. It's also really nice when I'm bringing in new employees. I can be very selective on what I choose for them to be assigned to. And it helps knowing how long that's going to take, and knowing that they're probably going to take a little bit longer than an experienced person, but I can see that learning curve, and I can see them I can see them slowly getting better at it and getting to a point where they're going to reach the standard. I'm not too consumed with how much planned work we're doing as much as is it a workload balancing tool. Unplanned maintenance, unplanned hours for repairs that are done when the machine is not running. So, for us, we work on Friday. We don't work much on Fridays. We may have half the equipment running. Well, just because we're not using it doesn't mean that it's down. So that's not downtime. It's just not running. So we may say, hey, let's do a bunch of let's move out this unplanned work, or let's do some planned work that we wanted to do now that the machine is just not being used. That does not increase your downtime measurement. At least that's not how we measure it. That's how we look at it. I feel it would create kind of a false indicator. There are special projects that my team works on, and probably some of your teams as well. They're unplanned and they're separate from equipment. Right? That's not impacting downtime. You have unplanned hours on equipment that's being worked on when it can still be running. So they may be doing something that just kind of popped up, but the machine can still run. So that doesn't affect downtime. When unplanned does affect downtime is when it's a shutdown, or, well, to do this repair, like a shutdown meaning it's shut down on its own, like it just went down. Or it could be that we have to do this. It's not an emergency, but we will have to shut it off to do it. And we measure the downtime effect from those two different types of unplanned. So that's kind of a nice comparison to kind of see the difference there. Moving on to the next metric, which would be completed and open orders. We look at two types of work orders. So, or actually you could say just orders in general. We have work orders. So work orders are defined as work that's created and submitted by the maintenance team themselves. Like my team says, oh, I want to go do this work. They fill out a work order for that. And then it's a separate tracking mechanism in Limbo. It's a separate tracking. Work identified during scheduled PM tasks. Work could be identified from a meeting. So it's nice to see the number of work orders being created by my team outside of their set schedule. Like it provides information. It provides me to go, oh, we really had a lot of planned work orders out of our usual schedule. Let's look at why that's happening. Not that it's a bad thing, just why is it their attention is now being moved over here. The other way to submit work in the department is something called a work request. That's more of an external request for work, and that is coming from people outside of the maintenance department. It could be coming from production, it could be coming from the office, it could be coming from the shipping department, it doesn't matter. So what it allows me to do is see where the inputs are coming from, right? Like they're coming from different places. We have a computer down in the production area where our crews are allowed to submit work requests. It engages them. It gives them a little more buy-in. It's better communication between the two departments. It usually creates a conversation. Like we don't just willy-nilly go start doing work. We often go, oh, this request came in from this production area. We're going to go and we're going to discuss it with them and see what's going on. And I'll be honest, if one of the things that was one of our initiatives this year was to really improve communication between the production crew and my team. And we had initially not allowed our crew to submit requests. They had to go to their supervisor. They would log into the system and do it. And it created some time gaps and situations where they would actually tell the supervisor and it wouldn't actually happen. So I said, forget it, put computers down there. And it's been a great tool. It's been phenomenal. Highly recommend it. So anyway, that's how I'm tracking, capacity, and output in the department. Moving on to our last one here, inventory costs. Boy, like where do you start with this? You really could pick and choose what you think makes sense on this one. I'm going to kind of give you an example of how, what we measure and then what we track in inventory. Replenished parts, these are parts that you're going through on a regular basis. They could be being used through scheduled maintenance, scheduled PM. Usually that's what it is. What's really nice about tracking replenishment parts, stuff that you are, at least in a given moment, are going through, is at first, yes, it obviously tracks quantity and it tracks cost. That's simple. But it's also tracking how well work is being done on a piece of equipment. So when I came on, I have a different team than I had when I came on 5 years ago. And we had situations where we had staff doing the wrong repairs, the wrong people doing the repairs. Honestly, anyone who had some knowledge of the equipment could get in there. Well, so what happens is we're doing a lot of repairs. Equipment's going down a lot because we don't have the right cross-trained individuals doing the right thing. So on the back end, we're going through parts. We're just going through parts like crazy. And I was under the illusion like, okay, maybe this is just the way this equipment is. I'm learning the equipment, right? Well, as I finally identified, like, this is a cross-training issue. So as I was able to develop my team better, change my team in some capacity, to be honest, all of a sudden, we started doing the repairs properly. And what do you think happened to our replenished parts cost inventory? It dropped. Like, we even got to a point where our inventory was collecting dust, no lie. So that's a big one. I mean, it is showing a lot of stuff going on in the department. You can track your replenished supplies. It's not an indication necessarily of performance. We just go through stuff that we need to run the department. I do track that. I also track one-time repairs. So this could be something big that comes along. Maybe it's a part that really goes out of service every 5 or 10 years. One-time repairs are really important to track because, at least from our perspective and in our company, they can be big expenses. Like, we got to change a gearbox, and that's $5,000. And we're like, okay, well, why is the gearbox going out? Are we going to have to maybe go look at our other gearboxes? They may have a similar lifespan in them. One-time repairs is an important one to measure. It really is. And it can be, at least from our perspective, it's a high cost, but we try to obviously minimize it as much as we can. And then we have a lot of special projects that go on. So I do manage, or I'm sorry, I measure the inventory material that's being connected to special projects. Really, that's more for accounting purposes and taxes. But yeah, that's the ones we look at. And I get a report every 2 weeks on inventory. I compare them to my goals. I communicate that with my team. We create systems and processes to manage your inventory better, make better decisions on equipment to keep our costs down. And I'm going to show you a really nice spreadsheet that kind of illustrates that with not our real numbers, but some numbers that are relatively close to give you an idea. So that's about as far as I want to go with metrics. I hope it kind of gave you a good understanding of, common ones we're using, and some other ones you have options to. So again, you can email me and I can definitely try to steer you in the right direction on what might work for you guys. So goals and reporting. Well, you need targets, right? Like, you need to create goals that you're shooting for. And I'll be honest, a lot of companies don't have goals in place, what they're trying to get to. Like, it's kind of like, well, how do you know how to get somewhere if you don't know the destination? So you can create goals and targets on an annual basis. You can create them on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis. We have annual goals. So an example I'm going to show you is like, well, as long as we meet our goal on average, you might have some months that are above, some that are below. We do communicate and track those monthly ones, but at the end of the day, if we can meet our target at the end of the year, then we're happy. But as you are measuring it each month, you see this, right? So you can begin to make decisions on where you're headed. Pick goals that are achievable but challenging. 100% uptime might not be a good goal, right? 50% might not be bold enough. So, and I not only did I recommend that you change your metrics sometimes, change your goals as well. Sometimes you may set a goal that's too low, or you set a goal that's too high, or you're continually meeting your goal and it's time to maybe bump it up a little bit and see if you can reach it. So just achievable but challenging. Create action items around meeting each one. Like, okay, how are we going to get there? You know, we don't just throw it out there and just hope for the best. Like there's decisions you have to make to get to those goals. And again, change them as necessary. I really do believe in that. You know, here's an example of, you know, goals that we have. You know, we have an uptime goal of 98% on our equipment. We have a goal for call-ins. So I mentioned in the uncommon list that you can look at call-ins. Obviously, 0 is a great number. Unplanned maintenance around 20 hours. And then our mean time before failure goal is 30 days. So for those in the room that don't know what mean time before failure is, it's the amount of time on average that you will go before you see a failure on your equipment. I'll be going over predictive maintenance modeling and this metric in next month's webinar, but this is just a good example of ours, of how targets we have set for our company. And the last piece of this is your reporting. So I had mentioned earlier, you know, it's kind of like know your audience. Like, you know, my team is an individual department. We measure and report. We measure and we report what makes sense for us to communicate in our meetings. When I go to my operations meetings or I go to our executive meetings, I bring different information. Okay. So report it based on who you're reporting to. Because not only, well, do they need to know, but can their department contribute? Do they need to know what's going on? Like here's a really good example of, you know, our inventory costs. So it was just tracking part replacement, right? One-time repairs. Well, I realized after a couple of years, I'm like, wait a minute, there's really two categories here for one-time repairs. There's literal performance on the equipment and damage on the equipment that is coming from production. And not that they're purposely damaging the equipment. It's depending on the work, you need to have more experience. There could have been times we went through a lot of new people. And yeah, at the end of the day, maybe not just paying attention, let's be honest. I decided to break those out because when I'm reporting to my team about one-time repair costs, it's one-time repair costs. When I'm reporting to operations, it's also discussing, here's the cost we are incurring due to damaged equipment from new operators. That is incredibly valuable information. It's not a blame game. It's just like, it's saying we have to start cross-training our people better. We have to start maybe creating different levels of expertise in different areas. Maybe there's something we need to do in the maintenance team to modify the equipment so the damage is mitigated. So just think about that as you move along. Like you have to report information based on the audience so you can actually get a result. You know, monthly averages and totals, trends you want to report, like definitely trends is something that I communicate with other departments on, things we're seeing. Yeah, ways you can improve it, which is really what it comes down to. So I'm sure all of you listening have been through multiple meetings in your life like I have. Obviously, I'm painting an ideal situation. Sometimes there's a lot of finger pointing. Sometimes there's a lot of blaming. Yeah, that's just the reality of working. Obviously, I'd like to paint a more ideal situation. And we tend to try to lean towards that the best we can. But we're not perfect like nobody else. So this right here is a really good example of, say, how are you comparing to your annual goals? So this spreadsheet right here is a really good example of something that I would be creating at the end of the year for our, you know, our New Year's strategic planning that comes near the end of the previous year. It has the goals for uptime percent, unplanned hours, call-ins, and mean time before failure. That's our main ones right now. It shows the goal, and it shows what was actually achieved each month. You're just looking at this, you can see, where it fluctuated. We had a few call-ins, where our mean time before failure moved along throughout the year or each month, and then totals at the end. So it's an incredible snapshot of where you're at. Any CMM, any centralized maintenance management system, just boom, just regenerates that for you. And it's great reporting. And then for my team, we sit down with this and go, okay, do we need to keep tracking unplanned maintenance hours? Do we need to keep tracking uptime percent? Like we hit our target like every month, except for maybe one. Does that make sense anymore? Do we need to track? Do we need to start tracking mean time before recovery? Like whatever it is. So just get the list out and start going through it and establish new goals. I'm actually challenging my team right now to look at ways we can measure and report our performance on special projects, because we are heavily leaning towards engineering, special projects, retrofits, asset preservation. Like uptime percent may not be serving us anymore, and we need to move on to something that better represents our initiatives as a department. And as a coincidence, those conversations are happening right now because we're September. We got 3.5 months left to go, and we got to have a new standard for next year. So I'm challenging my group on that for sure. This is a really good example of information that we use to look at how her inventory was for the year. Now, I'm not allowed to show actual numbers, so I put some in here that are whatever, close enough for talking purposes. I have a goal for inventory in all of my facilities. It's a department goal, so one plant might have more expenses than another in a given month, as long as the average comes out to the goal. It doesn't mean that I'm not looking at individual plants and making decisions based on inventory. I still look at it as an overarching department. And again, it's so nice to see not only each month as it goes, but like where are we at the end of the year? I'm constantly like, oh, we made our target for inventory for the year, so I'm buying lunch all this week, things like that. I'm definitely trying, and I'm not saying that it's just my team that helps us get to our goals. It's just that that's where I've got some responsibility and control over, is reward them for it. And we've been seeing our inventory costs drop a lot this year with no impact to equipment performance, at least negatively. And I've said in meetings, like, listen, there's a reason why we are where we're at, and it's not because of one department, right? So total productive maintenance being an overall equipment effort, overall company effort to maintain equipment. I was like, I may have put in processes and systems in place to manage your inventory better. I have to give credit to my team for doing their work in the proper way that's been documented. When a vendor recommends a part that costs a lot of money to fix a potential problem, we challenge that, and we don't just go try to find another vendor. We try to challenge the way we're doing the repair to maybe not have to spend that kind of money. We spend a lot of time training production crew on damage mitigation, and giving them special tools and information on how to better run the equipment. We've modified equipment. We've done it's a whole company approach. So I guess what I'm getting at is that is where you see all of your metrics get better, is when in some capacity and some variability, everyone's involved in doing that. And it takes a little time to get there. Putting those pillars into place takes time. There's no silver bullet, but the metrics are your starting point. You got to put some goals into place. So I hope in the 45 minutes that we have, which is about where we're at now, it's time for some Q&A, is that it gives you an idea. And again, there's probably a good handful of you here that are already measuring these. I hope it's given you some new information. I'm happy to answer more questions via the next 15 minutes or through email. Absolutely, but I hope this was beneficial for you. I really appreciate it. So just remember, you know, it involves everybody. Track metrics that make sense for your company. Establish your goals and targets, and just constantly be watching it and tracking it. Just real quick, a couple things here. We're going to do another webinar on October 3rd at the same time. I'm going to go into a little more detail on the other pillars, I guess you could say. So proactive, preventive, and predictive maintenance modeling. There's my email right there. I'll leave it up just for a second. But yeah, it'll be a good webinar. I'm going to cover, you know, operator level PM, how to identify that. I'm going to get into the preventative maintenance, and then get into predictive modeling for those who are interested in seeing what that's all about. That's actually one of my favorite metrics. So my email is powerclean529@gmail.com. Yeah, no problem. You can email me. I'm happy to answer questions. And then the last thing here, Katie, on this was this right here. I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk to that or not.
Yeah, sure.
I am wrapped up. So
Awesome. For those of you that aren't already Limble users and want to see a customized demo for, you know, your unique use case, you can scan that QR code there and schedule a tour of the software, which actually will be a really great segue into. I'll moderate some of these questions here, but speaking of, you know, for any of you that really want to see what the tracking capability is inside of Limble, if you jump from here to a demo, you'll be able to see kind of exactly the way that Chris was able to put his own reports together, pulling the metrics that are automatically calculated for you in Limble. So I'll start over here with one question from Steve. I love the tracking. How easy is it to create those tracking widgets in Limble? So if Chris, if you can speak to just like those last two spreadsheets that you put together, obviously that's your own report and an aggregation of the data that you manage in Limble. But I'd love to have you talk about what your process looks like and how you grab that information from Limble to be able to put this together.
Yeah. So I pull information from, okay, so you're asking specifically, Katie, these metrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so your uptime, your unplanned hours or tasks, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, a demo is probably the best way to do it. Is his name Steve? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Steve, it's easy. I mean, it's literally you go in and you select they're called assets, which is equipment, and you pick a time frame that you want to get a snapshot of, right? So you could do, you know, the whole length if you had the equipment, the last 2 weeks, the last year, the last 3 months, this date to this date, and you run it, and it just spits it out. There it is. There's your information. So you can go through the asset section and do individual equipment. You can do that for uptime. You can do it for unplanned maintenance hours. You can do it for a variety of metrics. Call-ins is something I have to log into our time card for. So you can get information directly from the actual equipment section, or you can go into and create a widget on the main page, and you can pre-select filters on what you want to get. You're picking equipment, you're picking locations, you're picking the metric, you're picking a time frame, and you hit run a report, and it just shoots it out. And the great thing I like about that is I could actually, I think the word is import or export it into Excel, and then I can do more things to it. So as far as the inventory, I compare, it's the same thing. You can run a report on inventory through the assets or through the widget, but then I also compare it to our profit and loss as well to make sure things, because not everything is captured in Limble. Like my guy's taking duct tape and zip ties. I don't track that, you know, but I have that in the QuickBooks. So
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so to the additional question that's sort of tacked on here, like you can do that with basically any metric that you can possibly conceive of. You can pretty easily run a report in Limble, and you can set them up so that they're recurring. So you've got a dashboard that just is regularly running the report. So basically, as long as people are completing their work, all of that stuff is automatically tracked, and you just configure the reports the way that you want within the framework that you are creating, just like Chris showed you today, the framework around whatever metrics you want to measure as an organization. And that is an automatic, repeatable framework for you.
I think it's important to mention though that, and I think everyone in who's listening can probably relate to this. It is garbage in, garbage out though.
Totally.
Right? Like if there, I mean, there definitely is a reoccurring thing where I often will go through and verify downtime is being reported properly on an individual task, right? They are properly removing parts from Limble. They're right. It's garbage in, garbage out. Like, so I really press my guys, like, it's got to be accurate because I'm taking this information and running with it. I mean, I spent a period of probably babysitting for a while, then I got better things I got to do. So, but yeah, it's really easy to pull out that information.
Yeah, for sure. And Jacob, I'll answer your question here really quickly that we are going to do a webinar here in the next month or so on how to set up your reporting in Limble. So check your emails. We'll be blasting about that so that you guys can come check that out. There's another question in here from Ross. I'll spit this out here. Are there aspects of equipment, such as runtime, that CMMS users should be aware of to accurately present MTTR and MTBF?
Okay, so you're talking about mean time before recovery, mean time before failure, correct? Okay, and what was the front end of that question?
I'll read it again. Are there aspects of equipment, such as runtime, that CMMS users should be aware of to accurately present the MTTR, MTBF? So maybe another, and this is my assumption, but maybe another way to phrase that is like, how is that being calculated? Or what is being taken into consideration for those metrics?
Right. Okay. So mean time before. Okay. So Limble doesn't know if the equipment is being used or not. It doesn't know. Like I'm assuming you input into Limble available time and number of shifts you're running, right? But it's just assumed, like, if you have it in there Monday through Friday, and again, Jacob, I hope I'm answering your question. Monday through Friday, we run this shift, this hours, this shift, this hours. If Friday comes along and you decide to not run your night shift, right? Limble is just assuming you're running. So unless you document some downtime and then it goes, oh, it wasn't running, pull that from out of Limble, and that information is now being used to calculate mean time before recovery, mean time before failure. So you might have to do a little bit of manual manipulation of the information to get the accurate output you're looking for. I think that's what he's asking. And Jacob, if it's not what you're asking, send me an email. I'm happy to go back and forth on that one. Yeah, totally. That's a really good question, but I just want to make sure I'm answering that the way he's looking for. So
Totally. All right. Let's go up here. Jeffrey put in a few questions about specific types of metrics to track. So I'll sort of amalgamate them into one thing here. But the question is about what about tracking utility costs, water, electricity, gas versus PM or UPM? What about tracking inspections, planned or unplanned? What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
So there's two questions there, or two topics: is utilities and inspections. Okay. So well, it really depends on your company, right? So I'm not responsible for facilities. So I don't. The person who's responsible for facilities is tracking utilities, right? Now with that said, is my equipment uses air and power, right? So we contribute a lot to the expense of air and power. But it's not something that we're tracking in my department. It is a very valuable metric to track, but that our general manager is tracking those things. So I can't really answer to like specific details. You know, from my perspective, I'm like, I need power to run the equipment. So if we need to run the equipment, the power needs to be on, and that's the end of that, you know. But yeah, I don't track utilities in my department, but it definitely is something we track as an organization. The other question was inspections. So I'm assuming if is it building inspections or is it equipment inspections? And the answer is yes, I track and measure equipment inspections because we do those. Building inspections, we don't have a lot of those in general, so I know that's something we don't track. Now, if you have a lot of inspections just based on your industry or the codes you have on your building, yeah, I mean, maybe that information is valuable, but I'm a firm believer in tracking stuff that actually gives us good information. And again, email me if you want to go further into that. So
Totally. Awesome. I'll do one more here, maybe two, depending on time. The unplanned, so this is a question about Limble. That would be great, you know, for both Limble and non-Limble users. Curious about how you use this here, Chris. So the question is, the planned and unplanned maintenance metrics are mentioned here in hours. However, Limble's reporting widgets show the metric as a percentage of total tasks.
yes.
Should this be considered as well, or does it
Sure.
make more sense to track time?
Both, to be honest, like whatever makes sense for you and your company and your reporting. I personally don't do a whole lot of that. But yeah, whatever you know, I hate using the same answer, but like whatever makes the best sense to define the performance and create action items to improve the process, right? So if it's comparing them as a percentage, if it's comparing them by hours, you know, I think it's really important to measure planned maintenance hours and compare them to standards you might have inputted into Limble and see where you're at from a productivity perspective. How it compares to unplanned, I don't really spend a whole lot of time worried about that. Now, obviously, if you're at 80% planned and 20% unplanned, and the next month you're at 70 and 30, and then 60, yeah, you need to probably pay attention to those things. But either it's percentage or if it's hours, I feel it's communicating relatively the same information, like where the work is going, and then make decisions on how you're going to manage that.
Awesome.
Best I can do.
Great answer. Thanks, Chris. I'll do just one more quick question in the last minute here, and this is about work requests. And again, I'm going to interpret this a little bit what I think is being asked here. But how do external user work requests keep up with the status of that work request? So, say somebody submits one using a QR code. How do they know what the progress is on that work?
Oh, okay. So that's a good question. So we actually had that problem. So Limble, okay, so when someone fills out a request, whatever you fill it out, is that they put in their email address. So when the work is done, an email goes to them and says, your work is done. But that doesn't provide status, right? Now there might be a status function in Limble that I don't know about, Katie. So what we actually do is that we have a what's called open request form that goes out to our production supervisors that my team and I put together that gives status on those requests. It's separate. It's an Excel spreadsheet, right? So when they have their weekly meeting and say, hey, here are the 5 requests that you guys have put into Limble. They're working on them. Here is the status of them. And then when it's done, Limble then sends an automatic email to who requested it. So again, just because I'm unaware of a potential status mechanism in Limble doesn't mean there isn't one. I'm just unaware of it. But that's how we bridge the gap. So
yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, just so folks know on the call, you can customize what those notifications look like for work requesters. So you know, you can send out you know, that information depending on however you customize it. We are going to be doing a live demo with one of our solutions engineers on that specifically in the next couple of weeks about work orders and work requests. So if you want to see, come check it out, like how how the
I might.
process actually
Yeah.
looks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scan that, you scan the QR code, you get the form, but then like what happens after that? Does it go into a black hole, right? And the
Right.
whole purpose of Limble is that that doesn't happen, right? It doesn't go into a black hole for the maintenance team, and it doesn't go into a black hole for the work requester either.
Okay.
And so it creates this visibility so that everybody knows what the process and the
That's
steps
fantastic.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just yeah. Yeah. I'm not an expert of Limble. I just,
Yeah, no,
it's an
I
it's
mean,
an
you are, Chris. As a user, you definitely are. But yeah, so just so that folks know on the
that's
call,
great.
that yeah, you're all invited to that demo that we'll do in another couple of weeks. You'll get an email about it.
Great.
We'd love to see you there.
Yep. Cool.
Awesome. Well, we are out of time. But like Chris said, if you've got more questions, feel free to let us know. And we'll get you answers as quickly as possible. Several of you asked if there's going to be recording. Yes, there will be. We'll send one promptly after the session is over and all processed and everything. And thank you all so much for being here. Chris, thank you for sharing your expertise, and looking forward to much more in the near future.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a great Thursday.